We'll turn it over to Mark and security.
Feel better, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Feel better. All right.
Hope it's not the COVID.
I don't think so. It's not the same symptoms. Trying to grab Mark's. Here we are. Okay, Mark. Make host. Change the host to Mark Vincennes and Mark, and if you'll hit mute all.
Where do I do that?
It's over under.
Oh, got it. Yeah. And I see. Okay, we're all good. Thanks for joining us, everybody, to the 46th episode of Lip Balm. Tonight we have a special episode, a MadHat Press new releases showcase, including Kimberly L. Becker, Roy Nathanson, M.G. Stevens, Joshua Corey, John Warner Smith, Joanna Solfrian, and DeWitt Henry. And a few different genres tonight, some poetry, some essay, some somewhere in between. So thanks so much for joining us. And what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about my co-host Cassandra. Cassandra is an award-winning writer. She's streaming live from Melbourne, Australia, right at this moment. As she does every Saturday or every other Saturday, depending on the week.
It's Sunday for me, Sunday morning.
And it's Sunday at what, 9 a.m.?
Yeah, 9 a.m.
What did you have for breakfast?
No, I didn't have time for breakfast.
Did you at least have a cup of coffee or something?
No, I'm thinking maybe a bit later I might get a mimosa because everybody should have champagne for breakfast, right? A bit of orange juice gives it legitimacy as a breakfast food.
Sounds good, although I'm more of a bloody married person myself.
Why does that not surprise me?
Cassandra is a scholar of prose poetry and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She's currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry, an introduction, and the anthology of Australian prose poetry. She's commissioning editor for Westerly magazine, which has been going since, I believe, 1956. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's one of the oldest and most prestigious ones in Australia. So send your poetry.
And we will all those who are in the know, email us later, and we'll hook you up.
Hook you up. So usually we read a poem. So I'm going to launch into a recent poem from the sort of atomic bomb poetry that I'm writing. I'll choose one that's not too grim. This one's called Hiroshima is for Lovers, and it's a prose poem because I only write prose poems because I love prose poems. Nothing happened. Forget that I kissed you in Hiroshima. Leave behind our hot silences and your shoulder nestling against mine on the blue streetcar circling the city. Remember that your body is marked by others' narratives and their stories don't belong on my lips. Your wife is waiting at the hotel bar with a bottle of cold white wine and an empty glass, and she will take the streetcar with you tomorrow. Everything happened. In your hotel room, you stretched my arms above my head and placed my palms on the window. From behind, you pressed me against the glass like a specimen. I saw the steel skeleton of the A-bomb dome against the blue sky. I tried to speak, but my words slipped down the Ota River and into the Seto Inland Sea. We stood on the Ioi Bridge, and I imagined its T-shape as a ventricle, and you, its beating heart. So I would like to introduce, oh Captain, my captain, Mark Vincennes, who is at the helm today in many ways, not just for Lip Balm, but for the amazing MadHat Press showcase we're about to have. And reading his bio is one of the pleasures I get every week because it's pretty exciting. Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss-American poet, a fiction writer, a translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He's published 14 books of poetry, including more recently Becoming the Sound of Bees, Leaning into the Infinite, The Syndicate of Water and Light, and Here Comes the Night Dust. Vincennes' newest collection, The Little Book of Earthly Desires, and a novella set in ancient China, Three Taos of Tao, or How to Catch a Fortuitous Elephant, are both forthcoming in 2021 from Spite and Dival. An album of music, ambience, and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is also forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is a prolific translator. He's translated from German, Romanian, and French. He's a total show-off. He has published 10 books of translations, most recently, Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Mertz with White Pine, and it was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Klaus Mertz's selected poems, An Audible Blue, is forthcoming from White Pine Press. His poems have been published in many journals, including The Nation, Plowshares, The Los Angeles Review, World Literature Today, Raritan, Asymptote, and Plume. His work has received fellowships and grants from the Swiss Arts Council, the Literary Colloquium Berlin, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Whitner Brenner Foundation for Poetry. Vincennes is editor and publisher, as you all know, of MadHat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He's lived all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts, overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain. And he changed it up for us this week, everyone who is a regular and knows. And where there are more opossums, fireflies, and white-tailed deer than people. So I'm sure we can get you to read for us, Mark. Please do.
You've coerced me. This is a little excerpt from a novel I'm working on at the moment. It's called The Life and Times of Freddie Culture. And each chapter is comprised of a prose poem. The man likes to carry an umbrella for when the nights divide themselves. You wouldn't want the stars to fall into your head, he says. He treads the bazaar in all his finery, his jewelry, wooden rings and red beads, saffron robes and a golden earring in one ear, and scrutinizes the workmanship, the weave or the weft. Each stand another find, each sweater in its maker's sweat, the frills and laces on a camisole, the stitching, and of course the labels. This one says it's made in Hong Kong, he says. Do you know how many tailors live in Hong Kong? I shake my head. 35,342, he says, then moves on. Next, he's up to his elbows in rice, basmati. Oh no, it's something extra long grain, grown on the tamarind fields of Geshakgor, the salesman says. My man shakes his head, grumbles under his breath, moves on. Do you want to know the true nature of religion, he says, looking at me. There's a fleck of something on his beard, and it's distracting. Ah, did you find the one bit of meat in the soup, he says? Pluck it out and eat it, right now, he says, fluffing up a pillow. And I do. Bet you think it tastes of King Solomon, he says. This paper fish was made in Hangzhou, China, he says, waving it in the dusty air. Had painted, no less, he said. Let me tell you one thing, one singular thing. To move forward, you need to rid yourself of your ghosts. All those mothers and fathers, he says, jabbing a piece of grilled octopus with a pointy stick, nodding at the vendor, chewing, then moving on again. Find the hole in the donut, the nut in the hole. I stare at him quizzically. He says, look no further. You found him. And we now move on to our feature. First up of our new MadHat Press authors, we have reading Kimberly Becker. Let's make sure to unmute Kimberly. Good. Can we hear you?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I'm absolutely delighted to release Kimberly Becker's new book, Flight, which is just out from MadHat Press. In fact, I believe I will receive the copies from the printer on Monday, and it's already available for pre-order on the MadHat Press website. I will, throughout the course of the session here, I'll post a few of the links to some of these books as the poets are reading. Kimberly is the author of 4 poetry collections, Words Facing East and The Dividings, both from Word Tech Editions, The Bed Book from Spite and Dival, and just released from MadHat Press, Flight. Individual poems appear widely in journals and anthologies, including Indigenous Message on Water, Women Right Resistance, Poets Resist Gender Violence, and Tending the Fire, Native Voices and Portraits. She has held grants from Maryland, North Carolina, and New Jersey, and residencies at Hambridge, Weymouth, and Wildacres. Reading venues include Busboys and Poets in the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. She has served as a mentor for PEN's America Prison Writing and AWP's Writer-to-Writer programs. Thank you so much for being with us, Kimberly.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to Balm for creating this wonderful literary community, especially during the pandemic. It's an honor to be here. I'm actually going to start with a couple poems from the Bed Book, which, as Mark said, was released recently from Spite and Dival. This first poem is called Snowbed. In Fairbanks in December, the room was stifling hot. You kept kicking the covers down to the foot of the bed, but you felt triumphant to have come this far alone to this unhistoried bed. The muffled outside light finally drew you out of bed and to the window where snow glowed in dim daylight, unmaking the bed of your mind and crumpling time like kicked off sheets. Alone beds are always safest. Later, in Bettles, sled dogs slept in beds of snow covered by sheets of changing lights. And then one more from the Bed Book. This is called Apocalypse Bed, and as you know, apocalypse is from the Greek meaning revelation. No peeping Tom, he wanted to be seen, even if in camouflage of lurid light. Woken from sleep, then paralyzed by fright at leering purple face of ghost or demon, peering through open sash just beyond screen, heavy heat, insect dirge of summer night. She, slight prey, pinned in weak arc of nightlight. Light as a feather, stiff as a board, she seemed. Decades later, flash of revelation. No ghost, just trick of blue lens in Vietnam issue flashlight shone on known molester's face. Most nights she tongues this bitter berry, juice purpling teeth gritted over years lost to fear. Now she spits it out and starts anew. And now I'll read from Flight with thanks to Mark for his patience and persistence with this manuscript. It's an honor to be with MadHat. And this book takes its shape from a Cherokee ceremony for the dead with opposing yet balancing movements of remembrance and release. And this first poem I'll share from Flight is called Code Talking. After a while, the code lies disused, as our people's language lies under our tongue, rattler ready to spring. Code talkers, Dene, Chalagi, used words for war maneuvers. No one calls me by the name you gave me. I am not that person anymore. I will always be that person. Choose whichever translates best. Whoever destroys you holds the coded key. Genetics encoded our physical fate, immune deficiencies, strange fevers of unknown etiology, nightmares that bleed into day with cracked code of truth. All I can witness to is this: your skin on mine made another language. Your lips spoke desires, contorted syllables. I was a child. You taught me to speak. All that's left is this: too late. I love you. I miss you in the ICU. The sound of someone coding, we said as much as we could, went as far as we were able. At least we sought the source. One word in native tongue releases years of memories, so better to stay mute. What does it all mean? You ask of all my letters, handwriting cramped and indecipherable. Gray fox fixed me with its gaze, close by maritime forest, paw prints and sand, and the yellow flare of a flower sent up in emergency. All of it code for something vital, so that when Fox cried that night, I woke up and said, I hear you. Fox, foxtrot, red, heavy receiver linking to commander. These words were always a disappearing act. If she were gone, I could live my life. We turn towards what we think will save us. We turn towards hope, and hope it shines on us and leaves us shining. This next one is called Secret City, and Cassandra, it's along the lines of a poem that you read. This is about the city of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and it's in memory of Tammy. They are building the Balm, but it's a secret. They are talking in code. They won't know what they've done until it's headline news. Now they are united in purpose. They have wooden sidewalks above the mud. Your roller skates make a thumping sound as you fly high above the muck. For a child, it was safety and sodas, while grown-ups worked in secret, arriving on trains, not knowing their destination. The prophet foretold it: the city, the railroad, the engines, people, thousands, factories, chapel, all hidden by hills tucked behind the river. People who worked in secret on the gadget would later whisper, we built the bomb and didn't know it. Some things we don't name that are dear. Some things we don't name that are dire. You said to lose me would be Hiroshima. This was our secret city too. Now the hills seem so peaceful. Activists climbed them, breath and heartbeat and righteousness, keeping it all in the news, keeping it all in the light. When shadows were pasted onto sidewalks, the secret was let out. People knew what they had built. And new prophets make headlines so we won't forget. Serving time for sabotage, they know that under the secret lies the secret. Under the secret, the lies, the secret. When my patient tells me she wanted to see me so badly, even though she no longer remembers my name, I am moved almost to tears. She'd told me all her secrets, too horrific to mention or imagine. Dying, she was finally trying to live past them. She is so skeletal that her port protrudes alien-like, but her vivid blue eyes are bright, and I tell her so. She shows me an award won in a nursing home beauty pageant. She asks me to open her window, turns her gaunt face towards the easeful breeze, closes her eyes as morphine kicks in, while white curtains billow in surrender. This next short poem is called Sacrifice. Naked, you begin to grass dance on the carpet, shoulder blades rising in rhythm. Later, you roll beads to conjure on me. When you shot the bear between its eyes, it took its human form, and it was you. You butchered your own body, ate it in sacrifice, hung your neck with splay of claws. And then lastly, I will share a section from the long last poem of Flight. The poem is called Questing, and it is the stance that ticks take when they are waiting for an animal to pass by. The poem mentions little deer, or in Cherokee, Awi Usti, who teaches the need for right relationship between humans and the natural world, even more important today in this time of COVID and climate change. So this section is called Fire, and it is written in the voice of fire. When all was cold and dark, water spider carried spark. Even the small creatures do their part. Now tick carries disease to jolt you from your ease. Disease can be purified by fire. I burned contaminated blankets long ago, but cannot burn your blood, although incensed at all you've done and all you failed to do. Not just anyone can start me, much less tend me. Only those who pay prayerful respect. Relationships take attention and intention. Otherwise, it is just parasitic. Sometimes I flare in anger, but generally control my burn, especially for new growth. Burn victims agonize as necrotic skin is debrided so new tissue can grow. It is hard to burn a tick. It resists longer than flesh. Awiusti needed an accomplice with tough armor. I can scatter and ruin all creatures and plants. Even the insects hasten to escape. Yet tick will continue to feed as long as your blood flows. Surviving onslaught, hidden on its host, attached to you. What are your attachments? What feeds you? I am most alive when those who honor me dance around me, not worshiping me as some have erroneously supposed, but through me worshiping the one who set fire in the sky, fire in the hearth of their hearts. It is then I glow red with pleasure and cast sparks skyward in celebration of tradition. Listen to story and song that elders recount sitting round my illumination. Once, little deer stepped into my circle of light. His white coat changed to glowing red. His antlers formed a delicate kindling. He tossed them as he stomped his little hooves. Fire is your guardian, not your friend. No more turn your back to me than on the ocean. One errant flame, one rogue wave can destroy you utterly. We elements keep faith with you if you keep faith with us first. I yearn to help you, but you must learn your sacred medicine. Stop burning all your bridges. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimberly. Fantastic. Once again, I posted the link to Kimberly's new book, Flight, from MadHat Press in the chat. Yeah, we'll have copies on Monday, so order away. Next up, we're going to hear from Joshua Corey. Let's make sure you're unmuted. You suddenly disappeared.
No, he's there, but he's still not unmuted.
I can't see him anymore. Shoot, where are you, Josh?
Unmute.
How about that?
Yay!
All right. Hi, everybody.
So, yeah, MadHat Press is absolutely delighted to present Joshua Corey, whose new book is just about to come out in April, actually, but that's the official release. For those of you that like a review copy, I think we would have them available in the next sort of 10, 14 days. Joshua is a poet, novelist, translator, and critic. His books include the poetry collection Severance Songs and The Barons, a collection of critical prose. The Transcendental Circuit, Other Worlds of Poetry, which came out with MadHat Press. A new translation with Jean-Luc Garneau of François Ponget's first book of prose poems, As Partisan of Things, and a novel, Beautiful Soul, an American elegy with G.C. Waldrop. He co-edited the Arcadia Project, North American Postmodern Pastoral from Astata Press, and Hannah and the Master, which is out from MadHat Press in April. He lives in Evanston, Illinois, and teaches English at Lake Forest College. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Cassandra and Jonathan, and to my fellow readers and all the listeners. Thank you so much. And this is my second time at Lit Balm, so I feel very privileged. Yes, Hannah and the Master is it's been on this bit of an odyssey. It was originally going to come out with Asata Press, but Asata, as many of you know, ceased operations rather abruptly in 2019. And Mark and MadHat were good enough to rescue it, and I couldn't be more pleased. And I'm terribly excited to have the book coming out with MadHat. It's going to be a gorgeous object. I will read a few poems from that book, most of them from the first section of the book. And the title of the book is a kind of the chronicle of this sort of speculative alternate universe version of the love affair between Nazi philosopher Martin Heidegger and his protege, Jewish political philosopher Hannah Arendt. So I turn Hannah, over the course of the book, she kind of undergoes this transformation from ingenue, who is very much at the mercy, not so much of the master as of his ontology. And then by the course, as the book goes on, she takes on this tremendous agency, and she ends up turning, in my version of things, into kind of a version of the Charlize Theron character from Mad Max Fury Road. It all makes sense. So I will start with a prose poem from the very early in the book that I think I read the last time I was here, and then I'm going to read things that nobody here has heard before. The poem is called, this is a prose poem called Cross the Streams, the Centuries. The master fixes his wing. From his mountaintop, he sows. Past the poet with his hands in pockets, eyes fixed on his shoes. Past Hannah in the lowlands, watching for the wave. The wave, when it comes, that sweeps away everything. Cows, factories, unhappy families, owls, the necessity of caring about owls. The desert jungle leaps in the night of human forgetting. Hannah sits up late in Freiburg, in Berlin, in Paris, in New York. She writes letters to the master that she does not post. The eagle stands on the postmark single-headed, bearing the symbol of the sun in its claws. The sun we have invited too close to the earth. It presses out the sky, no gods anymore. The poet invites the rivers that flow from every direction to the sea. The beach, the moon, the desert jungle is near. It surrounds everyone's breathing. Not so careful of the type, thinks the plagiarist, who is the poet's secret face. The face of terrified complicity. The ash from Hannah's cigarette. She writes from the night of tears in a language not her own. The calibrator listens in his bulletproof box, listening across oceans for the wave that a poet can name. Its origins as wall, as water, as soft targeted array, as emigrant flesh, mad X of the world, while the master soars terrible and blind in the wake of the larger predator named being. First love. Hannah is young, but she understands the master will never leave his wife. His eyes follow when, naked, she rises from the bed and squats over the pail they must use for a chamber pot in his cabin in the woods. He listens to the trickle of her urine in the dark, sees her teeth flash, smiling. Now, when she stands, she is a small, pale acre, and the black triangle of hair at his eye level, darker than the dark that surrounds them. Sweet halo of adulterous night. He opens his arms to her, white and fleshy, says something in German. Of course, it's their native language. As babies, their mothers each cradled their sweet tallow heads, singing Schlaf, Kindlein, Schlaf. Shadows, what the sun would mark. She gives herself to him, that night and forever after. Across murderous oceans, an endless self-erosion that penetrated from beyond. She gives herself to him, and decades after, an old man, he has only to close his large, dark, lustrous eyes to see nothing. The innocuous accusative, the destroyer. Mar City. The master lectures on concealment and truth. The poet coughs badly in the night of his work detail, and the plagiarist sits smiling at the edge of his daughter's bed, watching her sleep. The master writes being on the board in yellow chalk with a small b. Hannah smokes in a cafe somewhere, gesticulating, arguing with husband number one. The animals hold their breath. They are waiting to drop out of their trees into holes. They are waiting for the desert jungle, for Lake Michigan to drain away, revealing morning accomplished. I eat a sandwich. The master eats a sandwich. The poet wants a sandwich. The plagiarist is starving. Feed a cold, starve a fever, starve the fever of the wave. Hannah, as a very young girl, skipping her way to school. The master was an altar boy. The poet remains the poet. The plagiarist mounts the barricades and urges the mob to murder his stepfather, the calibrator. The calibrator and his whores dance across a tabletop in the moonlight, scattering the figurines of the civilian population, tanned and resting his flaccid cock on the table's edge. In a cloud of invisible smoke from the bones of dinosaurs, the calibrator is serviced by women in the masks of animals, with heads like donkeys, elephants, armadillos, and owls. Ontic thought hops from head to head like matches taking flame. The shabby heart of Shabbat lights a winter in every week. It takes countable weeks to do the work of the wave, and the calibrator's eyes cross when he comes. A rapture life, 400 plus parts per million. The world eats the earth eats the world. I'm a little obsessed with Emily Dickinson, and so was Hannah Arendt for a time. So in this poem, they kind of meet. If we called her Daisy, if she sat for a while in the over-perfumed parlor of the 20th century, watchful with the master's corpse, the master as corpse, 2 candles set at his head, throwing shadows, creepy. If later we discover her upstairs in her room, at home in diaspora, writing between 4 walls. A camera has to show you things. Daisy can only show herself. Weep for courtesy, but do not believe I witness. I am masked and dried like ink by sand, planned economies, a nostalgia for them, plans. Sometimes I crouch low, take shelter in door frames, book passage on a plane falling from the sky. Mister, you shook me. I spun the records. My parents understood loneliness and tried for a while not to live apart. Then death came. A good citizen needs a man to call you to tell him I don't need you anymore. Finches and other tiny birds. They follow one another like sparrows in a cloud. Mister, I am alive in time that you've forgotten, that you put away. Master, I am in a dress. I write to your evening, but will not stay. And the last thing I'll read is called Interior Letter from the Master. In Elegance on Ritorno, Bach Brandenburg Concerto No. 3, second movement, Allegro, Hannah. I brought what is most yours closer, right of return, for your averted gaze awakens intimacy from afar. Time is oddly mysterious. Can we feel it? Gratitude for what has become of us. I said, do. Love plants everything, breaks the enframing of the world. I have her fidelity to thank, my wife. I spoke of beauty. Who may reach into the depths of terror, but lovers? I need her love. I need your love, its Phrygian cadence, silent friendship. A fair copy of our conversation on the forest paths, in the shadow of the castle, that beauty may unite extreme opposites intimately. A sort of musical semicolon. The gift of return and the taking stock of so many years keep intruding on my thoughts, in which, far across the sea, you are near and present, thinking yourself here toward those dearest to you and toward all the things that belong with you. I say it again, do. Beauty is a form of terror, as the poet said, the tortuous intimacy of towers, the depths of ordinary life from which the angels, shark-like, strike. Her love, which bore everything in silence through the years. Love needs love. Hannah, when the century tears at you furiously, think of the straight firs towering up before us, into the light air of midday and the winter mountains. Everywhere the colors, the other turns his back. Your gaze, shy Fräulein, M. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. That was amazing. Definitely everybody be on the lookout for Josh's book, Hannah and Her Master. It's an amazing book, and it's available for pre-order right now, and it will be out in April. And next, we're going to hear from DeWitt Henry, whose new book, MadHat Press is delighted to have released, Endings and Beginnings, Family Essays. DeWitt is founding editor of Plowshares. He's published a novel, 2 memoirs, a story collection, and several anthologies. Sweet Marjoram, a collection of notes and essays, was recently released from MadHat Press. And just now, the one that I just mentioned, Endings and Beginnings, Family Essays. DeWitt is a professor emeritus at Emerson College, and he served as contributing editor to both Woven Tale Press and Solstice magazines. Welcome, DeWitt. Let's make sure you're unmuted. Unmuted. There we go.
Thank you, Lipbaum and Mark. And thank you, Mark, especially for being my editor and designer and publisher, and for inviting John Scoyles to write his splendid introduction, which frames this book as the last in a trilogy, and as John says, the most powerful of the 3. So I'll read a section which is about the renewal of marriage after midlife crises. On swimming. I was a good swimmer as a teenager in a swimming family. My mother had been good and loved swimming still, even after operations in her shoulders and elbows for bursitis. She told stories about diving off cliffs at Cornell. My older brother, Chuck, was on the team at Martin's Dam, our swim club, and also at Haverford School. He swam a hard crawl and also butterfly, and I don't remember if he ever won. My sister Judy, however, was better than good. She was a star on the Martin's Dam team, doing crawl, butterfly, and backstroke, and practicing for hours in the lane set up for 50 yards between the diving float and racing dock. At Baldwin School, she swam races, but also water ballet. She and her best friends, Kathleen and Kathy, practiced maniacally, and I went to their meets. I remember the smell of chlorine and slick seal-like clinging of wetsuits, as well as the inane music of blue tango they used for ballet. For racing, she specialized in racing dives and for backstroke and flip turns. I tried to imitate all this on my own as a junior at our club. I don't remember if I ever placed, but I must have at some meets, second or third. We were given ribbons and badges. I remember the practices grueling under the aegis of the Martins coach, who was also my science teacher at public school. I imitated Judy's smoothness in my crawl stroke, turning my wrist to slide into the water and cupping my hand for thrust, rather than slapping the water. When she swam, she seemed streamlined and effortless, gliding. She would pull ahead of her rivals so smoothly, just a steady, powerful glide and pull, and she would surge ahead. I tried my best, but my wind, even after hours of practice, laps and laps, was never good for swimming. I could push myself to the brink of nausea, but that was never the equal of the gifted. I remember JV meets at Martin's, the shivery dawn, the butterflies in the stomach, which Judy had too, and tried to calm with jelly beans. The pretense and pomp of a real race, team to team, standing on the block, arms back, ready for a racing dive. The tense expectation of the starter's gun, then crack, and spring forward for a shallow splash, an already churning kick and stroke pulling deep, trying to keep in my lane, barely aware of anyone ahead or behind, plunging, digging, each stroke, pull, kicking hard, heart wild, gasping every third stroke for breath, harder, hitting the slimy edge of the diving dock and ducking under for a tuck and turn, then push, glide, and back, pulling, digging as my strength failed. Arms ached, gasping, keeping in the lane between the floats, kicking my best. Can I make it harder? 100 yards, gasping, failing, and dimly aware of splashing in the adjacent lanes ahead of me, all body, all effort, finishing fourth, fifth, sixth, my hand hitting the dock, heaving breath at the finish, hardly able to lift myself out. Our meets were tense with other clubs, sometimes away. I remember Colonial Village just down the street from Martin's, a different format, different pool, and shivering, having to show up early Saturday at 8 a.m. When I got to college, swimming was too difficult a sport, not only in muscle and stamina, but in time. At Amherst freshman year, there seemed barely time to breathe and think, let alone go out for demanding sports, and swimming was one of the most demanding. I watched a couple of meets. I remember a star, Jack Quigley, now a doctor. The conditioning, the regimen, the dedication, and their performance were utterly beyond me. As for Chuck, I think he tried swimming at Franklin and Marshall after he had flunked out of Cornell, but then he quit. Judy, I think, tried too at Swarthmore freshman year, but then she quit after she got pregnant and married an upperclassman. We never amounted to much as swimmers. My mother, after our father died, lived alone in their suburban Philadelphia ranch house and had the notion to install a swimming pool for health. In her late 70s, said she was too fragile to travel anymore, so she wanted to make her house a spa where we would all visit. The pool in a sheltered plexiglass enclosure became our baptismal pleasure, and we all clambered in, splashing, playing with our wives and children. Alone, she swam laps for as long as she could. I don't swim much anymore, I confess. In my pre-retirement 60s, I am dedicated athletically to workouts in a gym. Neither my wife, my daughter, or my son are serious swimmers. Our New England waters are mainly Walden Pond inland, or various beaches south of Boston and on the Cape, or the local MDC pool, less than a mile from our house. Walden, for our family, has spiritual connotations. From the time our children were young, we and friends would go there, stunned by the privacy, no matter how crowded the park. Our family's best friends also swam there and had appropriated a beach near the original Thoreau cabin. on the far shore of the pond. Sometimes we joined them for picnics. Sometimes they went with our children and without us. My daughter, always precocious, sneaked into Walden as a teenager for illegal skinny dips. Years after these family friends had suffered untimely losses to cancer, first of their 8-year-old son, best friend to our son, and then of the father, Pat, a second father to our son, we rarely swam at all and rarely took the trip together to a beach or to Walden. Now summers in the heat, I may run 10 or 12 miles around the Charles River, then dip into the MDC pool alone on the way back home. It is a shallow pool, crowded with frolicking teens and sub-teens, but exhausted and hot, it is a blessing on a long run. I try a few laps in the old freestyle crawl of my sister, but my stamina is only good for 20 yards if that. Sometimes, special times, my wife Connie joins me and we swim together in these shallow neighborhood waters. One of the lifeguards is Caitlin, sister and daughter of the family friends with losses to cancer. We are middle-aged, 2 teachers, my wife in an elementary through 6th grade school to which she has given her life and is now assistant director, and me to Emerson College, where I've given my professional life. 2 summers ago, we were alone at Walden. We both feel the losses and the toll of time, but there is a lovely buoyancy. We wend our way through the paths around the rim and discover that our favorite spit has been reclaimed for conservation. We slip into the waters from a nearby beach, and the waters are warm. We swim together. The bottom falls away to the deep of the pond. I love my wife. I cannot speak to her or to others in words how much. She is a pure, constant, and affirming soul against all the doubts and contradictions of living. My loving is not worthy of her, but in this twilight, we swim as newlyweds. Thank you.
Thank you, DeWitt. That was fantastic. May we always swim as newlyweds. And next is Roy Nathanson. And we just released Roy Nathanson's collection, Conversations and Other Songs. But subsequently also Roy Nathanson and his friend Nick Hakim have released an album, Small Things, which includes lyrics based on Roy's poems in Conversations and Other Songs. So there's all this sort of interconnected music, lyrical poetry, saxophone thing going on. And we're absolutely delighted to have Roy on the roster of MadHat Press artists. And Roy is a saxophonist and a poet and a composer and a teacher. He's a recipient of 2 New York FA composition fellowships, several grants from Meet the Composer, a Chamber Music American New Jazz Works grant, as well as a Bessie Award and the Joseph Jefferson Theater Award. In 2018, the archives of his work were purchased by the Fields Library of New York's University, where he currently teaches at Gallatin College. Roy's collection, Conversations and Other Songs, just came out with MadHat Press, as I said previously. Also, the cover of which was painted by my good friend Anna Herrick over there near Boston. I can see you cowering in the wings. And it just fit perfectly because, Roy kind of intimated to me that he wanted this view kind of like from Brooklyn into New York or something like that. And just by coincidence, I saw Anna's painting that my wife Miriam had showed me on her iPhone. I said, that is perfect for Roy's book, And I said it to Roy, and Roy said, fantastic. So we just went with that. So thank you so much, Anna. And thanks for being here tonight. So Roy, let's hear from you. If we can make sure you're unmuted.
Unmute. There I am. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you, Anna. And I'm so glad to be here. And thank you, all these wonderful poets and everybody else who's being here for this. I'm so proud to have this book. Thank you, Mark. Okay, my first poem I'm going to read is the oldest one really in the book. It's from my first book called that I wrote all these poems in the subway, and it's called New Guy to Look At. Today, I'm the guy to look at on the subway. Today, I'm the guy falling asleep, all bent over. Bad news caught in my throat like a cold. Today, I got the call about the clicker. Doctor says, get crack and ante up, says he. Start telling time. Yesterday, it was the guy with the cane, looking sideways, dragging his stump. Today, Kane's beaming, sitting tall on the bench, back straight against the map, head touching all the way to the tip of Manhattan. I can't barely see Staten Island. Yeah, a lot of eyes on me today, just not the ones in the square brown glasses with the black scarfing their head. Those eyes are shut tight. Couldn't open them with a crowbar. Well, maybe if you got in there below the chin, with a line comes down straight like the don't step crack in the sidewalk that the lady with the pink baby and the guy in the fake French hat saw in the Darwin through May sign. The crack the headphone guy hears in the 12th bar of his blues, the crack we saw in the Prospect Tunnel when the light went out, the crack I tripped on today when I stepped on some trouble. This next one is a neighborhood poem about my neighbors that I love and here in Flatbush. It's called Shine. Mr. Noise claims it starts with breath hovering the road, driving from gut. So he gets in there with the rag after the jaws do their dance, before sound gets itself all dressed up. Says he polishes a few squawks, but mostly he watches folks argue over architecture. That's what Mr. Noise calls it anyway, when the sound angles itself and a person's face falls or a body goes slack. Mr. Noise says he helps out when he can. He'll lob a low F or a high B just beneath the offending phrase to shock the sentence at its root. He says it gives him time to drag out the rag, but generally, folks make their messes and Mr. Noise cleans them up. He stacks the word notes on a shelf between the first and second overtones of B flat and closes them all into a muddy sinkhole. Thing is, we like the guy fine, but me and the wife just can't keep him out. Noise comes right through the front door whenever the fuck. And my wife and I just bug out, but my neighbor, Ruben, he's kind of a believer type or something like that. He brings Noise his morning coffee, reads him the funnies, that type of thing. Anyway, one morning, Ruben claims he got lucky. Noise was in the kitchen, lips unfurled, rag in hand, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of his eye, Ruben sees my high D ring past his roof, sings right through his gunked up window. Ruben said it was really cool, like it had this different ring to it. He claims it was like a prism for the blotchy clouds. This next one is a one from this pandemic, this endless fucking thing. It's called Why I Move My Shirt Around. It's more of a schmata, really. I wear the soft flannel without buttoning, and my wife says it looks really sloppy, but to me, it looks like an ad for freedom. Each day, the shirt ends up draped in a different part of the house, over a chair or a music stand, hanging or lying crumpled on a couch, like it's covering up everything that might or might not happen. Generally, when I see it down in my studio next to the broken saxophone reeds or with its sleeve dipped into the water I use to wet those reeds, or sitting on the banister waiting to be lifted up and carried, I pause and consider the past day's luck given the shirt's current position. For instance, if the sleeve was drenched in reed spit and I got a good gig or played well, I do the sensible thing and leave the shirt sleeve in slop. Or if the shirt was hanging happy from the banister, but the hanging day poem was rejected from a magazine, I'd hurl the shirt atop the nearest chandelier, certain the new placement would ensure a better outcome. Today, my schmata lies flat on the floor, so I figure, on the one hand, yesterday was no picnic. The cable guy couldn't fix the modem. That messed up the neighbor's system. They got pissed, and me and the wife freaked. But as pandemic mornings go, Yesterday was nothing to sneeze at. April's sun was glowing gentle. The buds were starting to pop, and Eotha's weird catalpa didn't trip. So why kick up the dust? Why move the shirt? So all this writing really comes from a life of playing the saxophone. So I thought, there's no way I can do this without playing a few notes. And so I have a lot of songs that are written, poems that are written about based on lyrics of standards. So this is all the things based on all the things you are. So I thought I'd play notes for a couple of notes first.
Speechless.
All the things you are aren't enough to forestall the crashing financial headaches or late night battles over unused toothbrushes, unmunched lunches, lights not shut, surfaces not swept, or the existential morass around the kids' sagging pants. Even your promised touch of springtime can't protect us from the terrible job Leo did on the roof that caused the flood next to the garbage cans, which culminated in the tragic call to the roofer who really and truly fell. I wonder if I ever told you that there was a time when ripping through the chord changes of this old song afforded a guy a place of honor among young jazzers. How back then Sam Furness was my go-to pilot, sitting next to me at the Henry Street Big Band, alto strapped to his side, all the things he was. Achingly elegant, quiet, focused, a study in fire. Who could imagine that one day we'd attach those headphones to his fragile blue-gray head, 5 short months after the bad news, Mobley, Griffin, and Coltrane singing him into the breathless hush of evening from their golden bells. Truth is, things change, and the song was never a favorite, just another river to flop around in, another impossible lawn made greener by someone else's eighth notes. Today, when we were cooking oatmeal, I heard Sonny Chris drive his Selmer through the angel glow that lights a star line, and I marveled at the metaphorical power of stars, how they rise above the bridges of all these old tunes, even glistening above our most tragic roofs. And I wondered what star Big Sam ended up on, or whether or not he stuck with the Lamberson mouthpiece or switched back to the Selmer Sea Star, opting for a slightly thinner line to thread a breathless heaven. So this next poem I wrote after that horrendous fucking election 4 years ago. And at that point, I thought, well, I may as well run. So it's called And When I Am Elected. And when I am elected, the sky will always be the blue in the corner of each and every dream. Exactly the same blue you selected for your first true dress, for those slacks on your first day, the blue that colored your first broken heart on the day you renamed yourself. And on that glorious day, the grass will green beneath your feet, and that greening will never stop. Your kitchen floor will be greener than your living room, and each bed will green with desire until it reds with passion. For true color has always been my promise. On the day I am elected, birds will perch on every balcony, sing only your favorite song. They'll be accompanied by throat singers, 1,001 trombones, 1,000,000 Stradivariums, ouds of every description, and of course, more saxophones than flutes, except of course, if you're a flutist, because only your song will be sung. And there will be a place at the table for every one of your whims, a place for each and every complaint to lavish, to marinate, for each complaint to acidulate like kale. And I will chew your needs at each and every meal. And more than this, I promise the simplest and most enduring of charms, that every citizen of this perfect land will have a personalized rearview mirror to clarify their exact position on the road as the cliff comes into view. So this is another one of these little, it's a short little poem for this pandemic, and it's like a curative of some sort. Yesterday, I had a good idea. It was some kind of clever comparison. There were several different incongruous concepts juxtaposed in such a way that was designed to make you laugh. Then there was this essential gravitas hiding somewhere in the line breaks. It was a tried and true strategy that is often the definition of comedy. But today, someone close to me had to put her mask on and fly. And again, I was astounded to notice how quickly cleverness disappears into thin air. For my last one, I guess I'm going to read this one. And I just want to thank you, Mark, again, and thank all you guys, and my wife, Joanna, and Jeff Friedman, who's helped me with all these poems. And it's called After the Great Flood. After the Great Flood, I pitched my tent right by the overflowing streams of the Black Hills. Refrigerators butting up against washing machines, broken chairs, and mattress springs. I took my dog and clarinet out for a walk and listened hard for black elk, speaking in 70s tongues. After all, the 60s had ended and I just turned 19. Back then, I thought time stopped during an arresting plot, that mythology spread out from a moment, like spilled Coke on a paper towel, that history stayed wet and kept us ever conscious of its puddles. A hardwood door bobbed along the rapids as my new friend brought out his oversized joint. I just left my boyfriend and was looking for a girlfriend, and the book said God was in the forest, so I thought I'd take a look. The moon pointed its crescent toe at a kid's sneaker stuck to a rock behind a freezer tray, and pines glistened their Christmas secrets. It was my first real night under stars, unless you count nights in Catskills bungalows beneath cigar smoke moons, crickets and mahjong tiles bitching and laughing their familiar Morse code. But black elk made a convincing case for the difference in the two mountain ranges. This one was a place to start, he whispered. This one was a place where people found balance. And as those words flooded my mind, new rains came, and toasters and car tires floated by the tent, along with a broken rearview mirror that was moving so fast I couldn't find a decent angle to look back. Thanks.
Thank you, Roy. Your poems speak kind of from the voice of a saxophonist, especially when you read them. You're a fantastic reader. Thank you so much. And don't forget to check out Roy's new book, Conversations and Other Songs. It's an amazing collection. Next, we're going to hear from John Warner Smith. Going to make sure to unmute you. Let's see, try again. Nope. Yep, there we go. And yeah, John's new book. Well, John has published another book with MadHat Press, Soul Be a Witness, which came out in 2016, and just released is his book, Our Shut Eyes. And John is State Poet Laureate of Louisiana through this year, I believe. And the first African-American male to hold a position. He is the author of 5 books in total, which are Muhammad's Mountain, from Lavender Inc., Spirits of the Gods from UL Press, Soul Be a Witness from MadHat, a Mandala of Hands from Aldrich, and the just released Our Shut Eyes. John's poems have appeared in many literary journals, and he has been nominated for Pushcart Prizes and the Sundress Best of the Net Anthology. He's a 2020 recipient of the Academy of American Poet Laureate Fellowships. He is the winner of the 2019 Linda Hodge Bromberg Poetry Award, a Cave Canem Fellow. He earned his MFA in creative writing at the University of New Orleans. He lives in Baton Rouge with his wife Nava, and he's going to let us hear some of his work from his new book.
Thank you, Mark. I see FJ is also with us. I want to give a shout out to her and thank you for her patience with me and all the hard work she's put into Our Shut Eyes. I'm going to read a few poems. These poems, I have a tendency, as Mark knows, to write long poems. So I'm probably only going to read maybe 3 of them. I'll begin with artifacts, I guess, in commemoration of this month, Black History Month. I will say about Our Shut Eyes too, that all of these poems deal with the subject, the topic of race in America, and 22 or 23 or so of the poems commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Atlanta child murders. If you're old enough to have lived through that ordeal from and understand what was going on from 1979 to about 1981 in the city of Atlanta. So many of those poems deal with that. I'll begin with artifacts. Artifacts. One lunch hour, I stroll into a temporary branch of a public library in downtown Baton Rouge. On this summer day, there are no children here, except for the armed security guard, library employees quietly doing their work, and the sparse but neatly shelved stacks of books, periodicals, and DVDs. This room has the appearance of a lounge in a shelter for homeless men and women who browse, sleep in chairs, and stare into hope and time. I am drawn to the enlarged black and white photographs hanging on the walls, images of Jim Crow era library life, white patrons and employees, carts, stacks, and the first bookmobile, art, I suppose, to dress the otherwise bare, unattractive walls of what was a long ago vacated Crest department store, circa 1935, and the site of the 1960 student sit-ins that sparked the civil rights movement in Louisiana. In one of the photographs, 21 children, all white, sit classroom style and stare into the camera. I gather the school year has ended. It is summer because one of the 4 boys isn't wearing a shirt. The librarian, also white, is standing facing the children with an open book in her hands. There are no Black people in this photograph. Although today, the patrons seated at computers lining the wall where this image hangs are all Black. Gazing at these artifacts of years when America was either white or Black, I picture the jagged signature of Richard Wright's Dear Madam note and the vast new world he found by forging it for permission to check out a book at the Memphis Library. I see Mount Pilgrim's children, my 1957 kindergarten class of 33 Black girls and boys, all poor, who wouldn't have learned numbers and the alphabet without a Black Baptist preacher and his wife teaching them. I see Elizabeth Eckford of the Little Rock Nine walking calmly through a sea of jeering shouts to enter the jarring doors of Central High School, shielding fear with her round, dark glasses while armed National Guardsmen waited to turn her around. I picture little Ruby Bridges, an army of one, stepping like a soldier with a book sack in her hand as she enters William Frantz Elementary School in New Orleans in 1960 with U.S. Marshals at her side. Seeing all the firestorms and protests of civil rights flash in one blink of a camera's eye, I think of what I might say to my youngest grandchildren about this room if I brought them here to color and read books on this sunny June afternoon in Louisiana, nearly 60 years after desegregation. For certain, I would say that the history of racism and inequality in Louisiana is embedded in these walls, but the power to build their own lives in a better world is sown by what is read and learned of these books, speaking now as loudly and clearly as the framed images hanging here, and the voiceless poverty dwelling among us. So here's, again, another rather long poem titled A Screenwriter's Notes of a Scene for a Movie Not Coming to Your Local Theater. Let me read the title once more. A Screenwriter's Notes of a Scene for a Movie Not Coming to Your Local Theater. A true story. First, the victory party on the night of the judge's re-election. American and Louisiana flags, confetti and balloons, songs by Springfield and Goff. Then the judge giving a victory speech. The crowd, all white, cheering ecstatically. Flashback to a courtroom. The judge deliberates, adjourns, and leaves the courtroom, goes to his private chamber, adorned with custom drapes, plush carpet, and a mahogany desk with matching conference table and chairs. Lots of exotic-looking fish. Slips out of his black robe and hangs it on a coat rack. Goes to the parking garage, steps into his shining black Escalade, drives home, maybe uncorks his favorite top shelf Cabernet, or throws down a Jim Beam or two on the rocks, undresses, showers, and slips into something casual. By now, the trick-or-treaters are knocking and ringing the doorbell. Treats them generously with Skittles and candy bars, pretending to be spooked by little ghosts and space creatures. Goes back into the house and slips into an orange jumpsuit, the kind you see Black men wearing on the front page of a newspaper or on the evening news of local television, being escorted to jail or into a courtroom by armed deputies. He puts on a pair of white tennis shoes, then reaches for a tube of black mascara and paints his face until every speck of pink flesh disappears. picks up the Afro wig he bought from a black wig shop a few days before and plops it over his short blonde hair, stares into a stand-up mirror, smiles and laughs. Gets back into his SUV and drives to a Halloween party a few miles away. Upon arriving, grabs a pair of handcuffs off the back seat, steps out of the car, locks it, puts the car keys into the pocket of his prison jumpsuit and clamps the cuffs around both hands before he opens the door and goes inside. So last poem is one of the poems from the Atlanta Child Murder series. And it's titled Memorial Drive. If you're familiar with Atlanta, I'm assuming this street is still named Memorial Drive. It was named Memorial Drive back in 1979, last I heard, last I read about. And it was along this corridor of Memorial Drive where a good number, many of the children, the 28 or 30, Black children, depending upon which source you were found dead, with the exception of one child who was a foster child who was never found. But Memorial Drive. If 40 years ago you walked Atlanta's Memorial Drive, carefree and without fear, with all your senses on fire, and you strolled slowly through the sights and sounds of a city street, and you were lulled into a state of bliss by the dazzling brightness of day, feeling the future stretch before you like a mirage shimmering with where the asphalt rolled, as if you could reach out and hold every unlived hour and day in your hands and take control of your life, seeing beyond every turn and making the crooked path straight. And if suddenly the sun vanished into a blanketing gray cloud, and a Black boy walked slowly toward you, close enough that you saw the pain and desperation in his eyes. Can you honestly say you saw him? Or did his form and future drown with the light? Okay, that's enough for me today, Mark. Thank you all again, MadHat, for giving me this opportunity to share some poetry this Saturday afternoon with you all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so John and I have an anthology project coming up. We're going to start to release Secrets sometime in September. But keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, Mark, if I can also, in closing, make a plug for another book that I've got coming out with another publisher. It's not a poetry book, though. I would never have tried to publish a novella with you, but UL Press will be releasing a novella of mine titled "For All Those Men" in, I think, December of this year, and it's a poem. It's a novella, a short novel about a murder trial that took place in Louisiana in 1922 of a young Black Creole, and it also sort of chronicles the rise and fall of the Ku Klux Klan in those years, in the early 1920s 20s here in the state of Louisiana. So just wanted to make that plug. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you. And we're going to now hear from Joanna Solfrian, whose first book, Visible Heavens, was chosen by Naomi Shiab-Nye for the 2009 Stan and Tom Wick Prize, a national first book award. Her poems have appeared in many journals such as the Harvard Review, Boulevard, Rattle, Salamander, Margie, Pleiades, and also in the internationally touring art exhibit, Speak Peace, American Voices Respond to Vietnamese Children's Paintings. She's a graduate of the Stone Coast MFA program, a McDowell Fellow, and a 4-time Pushcart Prize nominee. Joanna lives and works in New York City. Her newest book is The Mudroom, released recently from MadHat Press. Do check it out, and I'll post it in the chat. Let's hear from you. Are you unmuted? Try to find you. Where are you? Let me see. Sometimes this is rather confusing, this new tech stuff.
Got it.
Oh, you got it.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. The cover of the book came out beautifully. The book itself came out beautifully. MadHat did a wonderful job. So I just wanted to show it there. I know some of you are getting yours in the mail. It's just such a delight to hold it. And it's been nice listening to everybody as well. Thank you. So I was going to read something else to start, but after listening to John, I thought I would read this one. And if any of you have ever been to the Caribbean, maybe you've had the experience of being in a beautiful beach all day and then going to a historic site in the afternoon. And historic sites in the Caribbean are often things like sugar plantations. So it's quite a strange feeling, or a strange feeling if you think it's not strange to other people to, go from your pina colada to a plantation. So this is called Annaberg St. John. Here is the table, the bread, the bowl of oranges. Here are the 2 children asleep in the ample sun. The matted donkeys, simple as pebbles, press their noses, soft as flour, into our palms. Here is the water, a balm, consoling with its tears. Here are your 2 hands, 2 scarred white fish, plucking the children from the rough waves which delight. Here's the sugar plantation, the tourists, the comfortable shoes. Here are the ruins, the copper pot, the stone base of the windmill. On Anna's Hill, the children turn cartwheels. Here is the day moon, lone witness to the horses plodding, the molasses blistering in the copper pot, the windmill's stately rotation. And the slaves, who warrant all poems, are the Jumbis, ghosts, who haunt this plantation, who speak with no translation, who weep while the palm fronds soothe. Here is the sugar plantation, the skeleton quarters, the tourists in comfortable shoes. Even though I've lived in Brooklyn probably longer than anywhere else, I was born in rural Connecticut, and that's given me an appreciation for trees. So when I walk down the street in Brooklyn, I'm often looking up at the trees and thinking about what they are thinking about, or wondering what they're thinking about. So this one's called The Tree Becomes a Ship. The tree becomes a ship. When men want to reach faraway places, they split me. They tie canvas to my trunk, ropes to my branches, and yawp mighty orders from where the wrens once slept. My roots and hollows are left for the forest child who stows away secrets, a toy gun. The closest the men come to longing is when they gaze at the sea's bosom and dream of women. This they do from the parts of me that hold them up. When they sleep in my hull, my split core weeps, and I drop dead leaves into their dreams. I also like to write lots of odes, and I'm going to read one called Ode to Salt, which I'll read from my husband, who is listening on a different computer in another room, such as the way Zoom readings go these days when you have children. So this is called Ode to Salt. In you live prisms, the hidden spectra of the great gray Pacific, infinitesimal cliffs that cleave to the jogger's breasts. You are at once clear and opaque, like the heavily muscled old boyfriend. Your jagged kingdoms on a loaf of bread cure the yeast of its bloated desire and facilitate an earthen crust that protests my knife. When I slice your playground, I sacrifice my thumb so that the tears of my body can mate with the tears of your tide. When you scatter, I wet my opposable God, and in my mouth millennia dissolve. On my tongue, you howl for your evaporated Eden, your mud mother's fecund warmth. Your sting is the ocean's rebuke for my crawling out of it. Indeed, it is possible your mute tectonic heaves are wiser than the ocean's lusty spindrift. But I prefer those cubic souvenirs from the grit of simple work on my skin, so that in the hotel room, when I arrive, damp in lycra, panting, there is something of your blessed infinity to kiss. This is so strangely quiet. But thank you for listening. Okay.
No, as poetry reading should be, right?
Yeah, no, I know. It's just, you know, when you have the audience, you can sort of feel the vibe. Okay.
Hooray a lot.
Oh, I wasn't fishing, I promise. Okay, so I'll read a prose poem. In front of you, Kimberly, who's written many, many, many. Guest. Once near a sea there lived a wind. The wind fell in love with the sea and its constant graces, the way it slept and heaved and reflected, the way fishes and moonlight swam in its generous graves. The wind wanted to share with the sea some of its own delights, small towns and their steeple bells, the skirts of lovely women, and of course the roads of the black whale who leapt to say hello. So the wind swept up armfuls of droplets and carried them to the small towns, where some atomized over the bells or evaporated at the sight of the women. Then the wind carried the remaining droplets back to the sea to greet the whales. But each time they returned, the remaining droplets huddled and fell. The wind grieved and repeated its attempts to clutch the sea until the sky was filled with clouds. And in this way, the woman in the boat scattering ashes could not tell which were tears and which were rain. I don't know how much time everybody has. Is one more?
Well, 12 minutes, but you could read one more.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll do a short one. You all probably know W.S. Merwin's Asian Figures. And one of them in there, they're just very, very, very short. And one of them in there, if I can find it in the book, because I'm going off plan, is called, what the hell is this thing? Mark, do poets have the order of their poems memorized?
They always do.
Oh, wait.
No. Poets are notoriously disorganized, right?
I know, yes.
Creativity comes out of chaos, right?
Yes, it does. Okay, so I can't find it this quickly. So I will just read the opening poem in the book, which is called "The Moon Has Come to My Window, So I Practice Gratitude." I attempt and fail frequently to be more Buddhist. The moon has come to my window, so I practice gratitude. I am grateful for the small children, their clamor as they run down the dirt road, the penumbras around them, their bright braids and weeping knees. Invisible inside them is a mirror for angels, so that the temporarily holy can recognize themselves. Their brows are a grave where ideas rest. The mothers kiss them there, as I just did, bedside, and the ideas move. And in this way, we are all free. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Wonderful. Once again, Joe's link is up in the chat feed, so if you fancy, getting a book, it's over there, and it's a wonderful book. Next, we're going to hear from the renowned, fabulous, well-known fabulist, theatricalist, and novelist and poet, M.G. or Michael Stevens. He was born in Washington, D.C. to an Irish father and an American mother. He grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, and Long Island with a family of 16 children. His fiction often portrays the crises of large immigrant families and existential struggles to survive in America. He attended the City University of New York, City College, where he earned his BA and MA in English and writing, and then attended Yale University, earning an MFA in drama, writing, theater, history, and dramatic literature. Many years later, he earned a PhD in literature and American studies from the University of Essex in Colchester, England. He wrote his thesis, The British Doctoral Study on the Origins of the St. Mark's Church, in the Bowery's Poetry Project. Shout out, of course, to Lewis Warsh, who just recently passed away. I'm sure you knew him, Michael.
Sure.
Michael has published many works of short lyrical prose, including Paragraphs, Still Life, Shipping Out, Circle's End, and Jigs and Reels. His first book of poetry, Alcohol Poems, came out in 1973, followed by Tangan Legend translations from Korean After Asia, and more recently, Occam's Razor and Top Boy. These books have been praised by poets and fiction writers as diverse as Seamus Heaney, Gilbert Sorrentino, William Arrowsmith, Hubert Selby Jr., and Maureen Howard. He's the author of the acclaimed novels The Brooklyn Book of the Dead and Season at Cool. He's published several non-fiction works, including the travel memoir Lost in Soul and the memoir Where the Sky Ends, and such essay collections as The Dramaturgy of Style and Green Dreams, which was the winner of the AWP Award for Creative Nonfiction that year in 1994. History of Theatre, or The Glass of Fashion, was just released from MadHat Press and grew out of Michael's lifelong interest in theatre history, an obsession with Hamlet, and his lifelong passion for the prose poem. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be here, and hope you can hear me. I'm going to read from the new book, History of Theater, or The Glass of Fashion, which extends about an out-of-work actor who lands the part of Hamlet. History of Theater is part fiction, part fact. Its narrative is discrete, i.e. discontinuous, and may be read many different ways. Each section is mostly a page or two long. I'll be reading from the opening of the book. The epigraph, the first words spoken in the play Hamlet. Who's there? Those are the first words of Hamlet. Who's there? Hamlet, oh, okay. Ham omelet. O'Shaughnessy sat in his favorite greasy spoon on Upper Broadway, eating the breakfast special of a ham omelet and black beans. He was struck by the thought that he was about to play Hamlet, not just any Hamlet. His prince, weeks in the making, 8 in rehearsals, 2 in previews. His Hamlet was an historical one back in the beginnings of drama, a Cornelius Michael O'Shaughnessy. Some called him Michael or Mike or even Mick, while others called him Con or Connie, or ones who did not like him very much. That con artist, Michael O'Shaughnessy, had pondered since graduate days as a theater major. That he had been required to take the history of theater course in order to, as he sipped strong Spanish coffee, he saw the chorus come through the paradoy, and he thought, still in the scene house, awaiting my conference. After the great triumvirate of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides died in power, I began to take liberties with my lines, Mr. O'Shaughnessy thought. Then the Emperor Lycurgus passed and made the act in doing this, and it was then I decided to leave Athens and to venture back to Sicily. There were great things still happening now that Titus Andronicus had assumed the stage, and I went back to working in mimes, and also found myself portraying the Greek characters, albeit for the Romans now. Menander sought me out for his comedies, and I was working often in his plays, mixing the stories, getting a good life for one who was almost now a slave. But the other actors were talking about Rome, and so I thought, make my fortune there, and went northward with the caravan, stopping in Adelon for some farces, and mine were on the way. On up to beyond. Here is frivolous conjecture. I am alive again, azaleas. It is spring and I am dry, feeling quite neat about it. I'm alive again, though I was never really dead or not alive. It is more like one come back to his own skin. Not a new man, I am my own self again, yet differently entirely from the moments which preceded me here. Crabapple, cherry blossom, dogwood, they burst for the first time this season. And like that, an old strategy lumbers inside my chest of me and that I am. What it is, I'm on, I'm hot. I take off my coat, I roll up my sleeves, I walk. The Academy. She wore her straw hat and the flower print dress, the hemline flowing to mid-calf. Under the yellow and white tent in the garden, she drank cherry pink punch, rum spiked and smiling. The day was hot and muggy, and night proved no different, and she worried about getting to the ballet by 8 o'clock. All of this was so long ago. I shouldn't remember any of it. And yet just the other day, I thought of that rundown neighborhood where the Academy was located. And immediately I saw her again, straw hat, antique flower print dress, pale and blonde, slightly intoxicated, anxious to get to the ballet. The thought of her has taken me away from learning my lines. I have a lot of I haven't seen them in ages. I almost feel like it's my funeral. And even some siblings are here. I know my good friend Peter. I think he would know who that last prose poem was about. Al. Ophelia said, "We know what we are, but know not what we may be." She said, "They say the owl was a baker's daughter. I have a friend who is just that. The glass of fashion won. So in Hamlet, Ophelia refers to Hamlet as that he was once the glass of fashion. About my face, what is it? Smile no, show wear, vats of beer, truckloads of cigarettes. Like Hamlet, I was the glass of fashion, presenting the past of an only child. How often I was mistaken for that, the wandering Jew, the charming Italian, or Catholic, or one of the children. My father, with whom I hardly saw eye to eye, even his face appears to me in the dirty mirror, my hand on the verge of lather and razor. I am 36 years old, I say. I cannot remember the last time my ex-wife or another woman flirted with this face, yet inside and behind it, I'm at least half those years. I hope, I wait, I shave and go outside, searching for Polonius. And the last one. This ain't no Ophelia, honey. This ain't no Ophelia, honey. This weary night, I lay down to sleep and dream, my mouth stale from drink and garlic, the dimension of my room flat and black, the status of my feelings unprofitable. At first I thought it seemed this way. Seemed? I asked myself, not it is, but seems. For many hours I lay awake, unable to sleep. But finally I drifted off, my breath iambic and even, no longer rushed and full of the fever of the day. I rested, I dreamed too. What I dreamed was not of Ophelia, though I thought of her before sleep, as I did my mother, thinking of in one image. This night was given to Helen. I do not know why, but it was of her I dreamt, as though she were everywhere and nowhere at all. I had been thinking of an anecdote about James Joyce in which he named an ugly photograph of a woman after Helen. A man, Schwartz by name, accused Joyce of killing Helen when the writer pointed out how old she must have been. She must be after living with Menelaus, then Paris, her time in Troy, and then how old she was when Dante saw her in the Inferno. Killed Helen? Joyce said, laughing. Yet the Helen I saw was even older than Joyce's. She was before Goat Song and the Dithyramb. I walked in the stream past Thesbus, then Orion, back into the drama, into the prehistory, into her moment. There I stood in her bedroom in Troy, like a casting director. I had in my hand her resume and photos. I am Hamlet, I told her. You little weasel, she said. Have you ever been fucked? She asked. I mean, have you ever really been fucked good, my little man in your breeches and buskins? Well, I said, always Ophelia. And she laughed. Helen let out this awful guffaw. Get over here, she smirked. Prince of Denmark. Thank you.
Le Prince de Denmark. Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. And once again, I've just put up on the chat Michael's new book, The History of Theatre or Fashion of Glass. Fantastic book. Thank you everyone for this amazing turnout showing. I think today we will not go to the open mic. We've had a long show and it's been a wonderful show, very intense. So I'm just going to say next week we have Michael T. Young, Nandini Bachara, Janine Willett, Carrie Farley, Mitchell L.H. Douglas, guest emceed by MC Rodney A. Brown, the artist dancer, poet. So that should be a fascinating show. Do stop by and see. Hopefully somebody will stand on their head or something like that. And just to close off, I thought I'd just read one little translation from the Swiss poet Erika Burkhardt, who passed away in 2010, whose books I've translated 4 of her books. And this is a little poem called The Little Parties. Do not frighten away the fleeting shimmer on grasses with gossip of the never and ever. Honor the drunken sleep or the rose chafer in a pollen crown. Gently bypass the hair-fine stalked bellflower, pausing to become one with the stare, perception, sight, and its senses. One more time, what the child saw reappears in the first glance, in the latest light. Good night. Thank you, everyone. Love you.
Thanks, Mark. Publisher extraordinaire. See you all next week.
See ya.